Welcome back. Questions around international law and state sovereignty continue to dominate global discussions, particularly concerning the treatment of sitting heads of state. Recent developments have sparked intense debate. Now, can one country legally enter another to arrest a sitting head of state? What would the broader implications be for international law diplomacy and global stability? To help unpack the complex questions, we are joined by Professor Dunia Prince Zongwe, an Associate Professor, School of Law at the University of Namibia. Prof, very good morning to you. Welcome back.
Thank you very much for inviting me, John.
Absolute pleasure to be with you this morning. Professor, well, quite fascinating developments we are seeing between the United States and the Republic of Venezuela. First of all, your reactions to all that's happening right now. What are your thoughts?
To some extent, it is unprecedented because going into entering a foreign country, carrying out military strikes, abducting the president, so that he could be tried in another country or in another country, that's quite unprecedented. People talk about Manuel Noriega, the ruler of Panama, but constitutionally he was not the president. So. To a great extent, it's unprecedented, and I think it has, as you can see, it has sparked discussion worldwide.
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, historically now, we now know that this is not the first time it's happened, but to just understand this from the law perspective, what does the international law generally say about the arrest of a sitting president, or rather a sitting head of state?
Well, it is difficult because of sovereignty, questions of sovereignty. Heads of state enjoy immunity under customary international law. And the reason why I'm saying customary international law is because it means that it binds states, even though those states may not have approved or adhered that principle. So it is quite extraordinary. Under international law, the area where you would see the possibility of prosecuting a head of state, a sitting head of state, it's under international criminal law. Under the Rome Statute establishing the International Criminal Court, you can prosecute a sitting head of state for war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and aggression. But this is not really what is happening. This is a country unilaterally entering another country, carrying out military strikes and abducting the president. So under international law, this is on the face of it, it looks like a clear violation of sovereignty.
Yes. And if you look at the charges, of course, laid against the President Nicolas Maduro, we're seeing narco-terrorism, we're seeing possession of arms, or rather drug trafficking, cocaine, and all of that. What are these charges strong enough from a law's perspective to actually then have a president not only indicted, but also then arrested and charged, and of course then trialed in another country?
Whether they are strong enough, it is something that will have to be demonstrated by the prosecution in the United States. The case is being prosecuted in the federal court in Manhattan. It's the Southern District of the federal court in New York. So it is a part of the United States sovereignty to decide which conduct constitutes a crime and what would be the punishment for it. From an international law perspective, the principles that I've mentioned, the immunity and the sovereignty, mean that they cannot lawfully exercise criminal jurisdiction over a sitting foreign head of state. But in the United States, it's a little bit different in the sense that it is the executive, in other words, the government, the administration, that through its recognition of whether a foreign head of state is actually the legitimate ruler, can determine whether he can be granted immunity. More specifically, what it means is that because in previous months and previous years, the United States has not recognized President Maduro as the legitimate president of Venezuela, the court can use it following the Kerr and Frisbee doctrine. That's a specific doctrine that they've used, that they can prosecute a person who's been even forcibly abducted and brought before U.S. courts if if it is not recognized as the leader of the country, and that was what was used even in the Noriega case. So this is how the U.S. will try to justify the prosecution of President Maduro. But that doesn't mean, of course, that it is not highly contested. It is highly contested. There are many states and many scholars, including some scholars within the United States, that believe that that kind of abduct and prosecute approach is a violation of international law.
Well, and what's widely being, of course, discussed now is that the United States have broken international law. What are the possible consequences that the United States can face, and who actually, what body or internationally, or any organization or anyone who can do something about this?
Well, legally there are remedies, but in practice it will be very difficult to carry them out. The remedies is, first of all, the International Court of Justice. Right. The International Court of Justice, the judicial organ, or if you want, the court.
But the United States does not actually subject itself to that, and it also doesn't subscribe to the ICC.
No, it's not the ICC. It's the International Court of Justice.
Right.
Yes, that's the court
the ICJ.
Yes, the ICJ. You are talking about the International Criminal Court.
That's correct. Yeah.
So with the ICJ, there could be an advisory opinion in which the court would basically say what is the law and whether such conduct would amount to a violation of international law, or there could be a litigation proper against the United States. It has happened before in the Nicaragua case, where the United States had supported military groups other than the government, the Contras, and the International Court of Justice found the United States in violation of international law. So a similar matter could, a similar case could be brought against the United States. There could be also decision by the Security Council, but there it's not very likely, because the United States, as a permanent member, can veto any condemnation or any decisions that could be taken under Chapter 7, which is the kind of decisions that bind all states members of the United Nations. There is the possibility of the International Criminal Court, but like you've mentioned before, the United States doesn't recognize the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. Remember what I've said earlier, there are 4 main crimes for which the International Criminal Court has jurisdiction: genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and aggression. So here, aggression seems the crime that will be likely used by Venezuela. So although the United States has not recognized the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, the unique nature of the International Criminal Court is that if the United States the officials that are responsible for these military operations in Venezuela, if they find themselves in the territory of member states, those member states will have the duty to arrest them. So it is not entirely, it is not toothless. So there is also the possibility of a General Assembly. The General Assembly do not make binding decisions or recommendations, but politically it is quite powerful. And this is what, even in the short term, is most likely to succeed, because then the Venezuela can try to collect as many votes from countries, members of the United Nations, as possible. And this is a way also to make sure that this doesn't become a precedent that would be followed in the coming years.
And of course, what we just have seen now is the condemnations that, of course, keep continuing to be addressed, or rather be echoed by a lot of international bodies. But let's talk about things beyond the legal aspects. So let's talk about the diplomatic consequences that could arise from such an arrest as well. How might it affect international relations, peace, and regional stability, especially for the surrounding areas where Venezuela finds itself? We also see Colombia also having a voice, or rather echoing, even strengthening its borders, of course, by expanding a military presence there.
Well, it is a regional problem, like you correctly said. If you look at the news reports, they're even saying that among the security detail of President Maduro, there were Cuban soldiers. And you've mentioned Colombia, but there's also the president of Brazil. Brazil was not actually very far from there. So how is it going to affect? Well, it undermines multilateralism. It undermines head of state immunity. In a very practical sense, it could even discourage some leaders from going to the United Nations. As you know, it's headquartered in Turtle Bay in New York.
That's right.
So if the United States can disregard well-established rules of international law? What guarantees would a head of state who's been attacked by the President of the United States verbally, what guarantee will they have that they will not be arrested if they go to New York, despite the headquarters agreement between the United Nations and the United States? And there have been threats already, as reported in the media, against the leader of Cuba and the leader of Colombia.
Well,
So
yeah.
they could be next. So it will undermine, in a very practical, diplomatic sense, this kind of engagement at the United Nations. They will likely do it remotely, and it could destabilize the entire region. The concept or the principle that was raised when observing the situation was the Monroe Doctrine that was used in the past in the United States to say, well, that Latin America is the preserve, the exclusive preserve of the United States. Of course, this is a violation of international law, and it is a neo-colonial, a neo-colonial character. But the consequences are far-reaching. We do not know entirely how this is going to unfold and whether other countries would be would follow. So more powerful states would try to take similar actions.
Yeah, and speaking of more powerful states, there's a lot of talk around of course, the powerful nations such as Russia, China as well, and what they have also put out a statement when it comes to them condemning what the United States has done. Could there be anything they can do as well as powerful states of the world? What are the possible legalities that they can also work around to actually find a solution to this? Of course, some of the powerful states in the country, in the world, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. After the Second World War, they emerged, and in the subsequent years, more powerful, as we have already mentioned. They are permanent members of the Security Council. They have quite a lot of leverage, not only in the Security Council, but also in the General Assembly. They also have leverage legally in the sense of cooperation. They can, through cooperation, try to reconcile the parties here. I'm thinking about the United States and the leaders of Venezuela. But it is important to mention that in any event, they could also assist by reaffirming the importance of having this rule. We're talking about territorial sovereignty, the immunity of head of state. It's very important because it emerged after the Second World War, because the drafters of the UN Charter knew that if powerful states make their own rules, the world will burn. And we do not want to go back to a situation where we are facing a third world war. So it's very important. They have very much a big role to play. And because they are some of the most powerful, they carry a greater responsibility to make sure that this doesn't become a precedent.
Absolutely. It's quite scary if you speak about that.
Yes.
Let's talk about matters on our home here on the African continent. Do you think there's anything that, of course, us as Africans can also learn, African nations can learn from what's, of course, happening right now with the situation between Venezuela and the United States and all other countries that are, of course, then also involved or being put in these conversations as well? What can we learn? Of course, when it comes to what is being the resource being spoken about. Oil is one of the bone of contention is also being brought up in this conversation. The United States is now saying that they're going to be selling oil for Venezuela. A lot of countries are also discovering oil now, also having in America, as the United States of America as an ally. And also this could also be some of the conversations or other areas to also target.
Yes, yes, like we said, if this becomes a precedent, it can destabilize the entire world, including Africa. If you look at the Constitutive Act of the African Union, the one creating the African Union, it reproduces the principles that are well established in the UN Charter, those of non-interference in internal affairs, territorial sovereignty, the inviolability of the borders, and also immunity for heads of state. Now, these principles are very important because resource-rich countries like Namibia, Nigeria, you do not want to become, African countries wouldn't want to become the next targets of powerful states, saying that, well, because you have all these resources and that it helps us industrialize or it helps us in the energy transition, we're going to control, because what we hear again from media reports is that the United States president said that they're basically going to run Venezuela. It's a violation. What on the African continent we should do is join the growing number of countries who, whether they support President Maduro or not, realizes that if we allow these principles to be trampled upon, then nobody is safe. The sovereignty of Venezuela that has been, violated can become our, sovereignty being violated as well. So it should be a principled approach that is not based on whether somebody wants to position themselves strategically for or against Maduro. And I would like to repeat here what even the spokesperson of the Secretary General of the United Nations has said, is that irrespective of the political situation in Venezuela, the integrity, the sovereignty and territorial integrity must be respected. There are other ways to deal with situations where there is a political crisis, because there are allegations and evidence also that President Maduro may have stolen the elections. But intervening unilaterally, that's not the solution, because the Security Council and the UN Charter provides for situations where we can intervene in other countries, and we should be especially suspicious when from what we see, it looks like one of the motivations, if not the primary motivations, was to get access to the world's largest oil reserves, which we find in Venezuela. Yes.
Over 300 billion barrels we hear.
Yes.
Do you believe, Professor, that international law is being applied consistently and in these kind of cases? And do you actually believe that the power dynamics between the states actually play a decisive role?
Well, the role of powerful states is very important, but you are talking about consistency. One thing that we have seen even over the past decades, but some would argue since the creation of the United Nations, is the double standards or the hypocrisy in the application of international law. If you look again at the situation in Maduro, in the case of Venezuela, you see on the one hand the United States and the NATO saying, well, Russia is violating the territorial integrity of Ukraine, but then you see the United States itself violating the territorial integrity of another country. So that is double standards, because we are dealing with the same principles, but they apply differently. If it's Russia, well, that's bad. But if it's us, it's justified by our own laws. There are several other instances of double standards. For scholars, for example, identified with what they called the third world approaches to international law, TWAIL as an acronym. This is nothing new. Unfortunately, the realization they have come is that when you look at how international law has been applied since the Second World War, it has been inconsistent, the only consistency being that it's only applied strictly when it advances the interests of powerful states.
Absolutely. And our only hope is that this does not drag on for years and years. Of course, we've seen what has happened with other countries, Ukraine being one of the examples that you just mentioned there. To date, what has happened, of course, yesterday, Maduro pleaded not guilty, him and his wife, on all four charges: narco-terrorism, cocaine trafficking, conspiracy of possession of weapons and machine guns. Now that we know that also that the court procedures is set for the 17th of March 2026, what does the not guilty plea mean at the court stage, or rather at this stage of the legal processes?
Well, there will be a full trial. There will be a full trial, but at the preliminary stages, one question that will almost certainly arise is whether he should enjoy immunity, because the full trial will look at whether or not he is guilty of narco-terrorism and drug trafficking charges. But before they look at the substance and the merits of the case, they will look at procedural questions. And one of them will be whether U.S. courts, although it's a federal court, whether U.S. courts, federal state courts, have jurisdiction over over head of state of a foreign country. Yes, that will be. It was a question also in the case of Noriega. It will also be a question in this case. And from what again we hear from the reports is that President Maduro said that I'm still the president of Venezuela. And that would be something they will discuss, considering that the Supreme Court has now appointed the vice president as the actual president. But it may be whether he was president at the time of the event, the abduction, and so forth. But in March, they will probably be starting raising objections to the jurisdiction of the federal court in the Southern District of the federal court.
Absolutely. And I've seen a lot of media reports saying that, what will happen as of yesterday, the not guilty plea until the 17th of March will be quite an interesting time to see, of course, for the president of Venezuela and also for the country of Venezuela, the residents or of course, all of those people that live in Venezuela, and of course, what is happening in the United States right now. But quite interesting times as far as geopolitics has it and international law. But thank you so much, Prof, for being here this morning. Of course, hope to speak to you, of course, as far as this analysis go forward.
Okay, thank you for having me, John.
Absolutely.
Yeah.